All right, I think we have everybody here. So thanks so much for joining us, everyone. My name is Valerie Schmitz. I'm the Senior Director of Continuous Improvement at CESA 2. And former director of a project-based learning school and very passionate about project-based learning myself. And I'm so excited that with us today is Camille Mortimer. And Camille is the Chief Learning Officer at Forge. And she's also a practitioner, a former superintendent, and founder of an expeditionary learning school herself. So we both come with practitioner sort of street cred and are both very passionate about project-based learning. So we come to you in very interesting times, assuming that probably a lot of you have done some element of project-based learning, but in a face-to-face environment. So our work today for the next hour is to talk about what project-based learning could look like in a virtual world, and also to introduce to you a tool that you may consider either in your classroom or as a district. But the nice thing about Forge is that it is a classroom tool as well, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a district rollout to manage some of this work. So Camille will get started, just in the chat, what's been your experience with project-based learning? Just in a sort of 1 to 5. 5 used it a tremendous amount in my face-to-face classroom. 1, not so much, but kind of curious. 2.5, thank you. Decimals are allowed. Excellent. Okay, good. So Camille, it sounds like we have 2s and 3s for the most part coming through and using with different populations. Oh, and there's a 7, so excellent.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
All right, so thank you. Take it away.
All right, beautiful. Thanks, Valerie. Let's take a look at what we're going to explore today, and I'm really excited about being together with you. I've planned more than enough, just like you do. So let's see what we get to. Hopefully, all of it. I want to take a look at distance learning itself and why this moment's really an opportunity. And then to take a look at how we would do place-based learning to make learning deeper. So, and why place is really important in this moment in time. Then we'll look at PBL, and I'm really interested today because all of you know something about PBL to dive into how we're going to make it rigorous and engaging and fun along the way. And then we're going to dive into making that all possible, making it simple and effective. And we'll take a look at Forge, which is Foundry's classroom software to help manage this work of project-based learning. So let's go along here. We're going to start with distance learning, and you know, I think. The quote at the left, it's only best practice if students are ready for it. I really love this quote, and aren't we really recently convinced how true that is with our own experience, right? If we're not ready for it, it doesn't feel like best practice. So how, in fact, could we look at this opportunity as a way to actually be ready to do best practice? So I'm interested in that being something that the other side of this hour we're able to say with each other. So, you know, learning at home has just a lot of challenges, and I know you know that from teaching at home, probably with kids around, or with just getting the technology to work, or just being calm and focused. Lots of homes are having trouble with enough access points for the multiple users, if they have access at all. There's this whole need for human contact and how it's missing, and teachers missing their students and the connection of being together and seeing each other. The big question of synchronous and asynchronous learning, and are we better when we're together learning, or can we have really rich learning when we're separated from each other? And is there a mix that's going to work for us, maybe long term? Then the differences between people. So there are a lot of things that are making this challenging. Some folks love to be online, love to be, you know, seeing themselves on screen and having the opportunity to see others. And then there's a whole other crop of folks who really want to be thinking and able to sort through how they want to approach things. And they're more interested in threaded conversations and messaging and journaling, and both are really important. So this is a time to learn to do this, to learn new tools and to really engage in this opportunity. But then there's this. So it really is unknown, isn't it? We really are not able to see the other side. What is going to happen? How is it going to work out? So like all big adventures, it's a little bit scary. And so let's lean into that together and see if we can reduce the fear a little bit and try to see the other side as we go along. So here we go. Let's look back. Just a short time ago, things like this were happening. You know, Foundry's been working with schools, teachers in, you know, doing extraordinary work, teams, collaboration, you know, in the classroom, in the field. And engagement and deepening learning have really been the focus of what we've been about. And I know it's what you all care about too. How do we really get kids deeply involved and engaged? But then, of course, this happened. You know, the new challenge of being separated from each other and engaging still. And how in fact do we really make lots of rich experiences happening all day long for kids, but we can't be there and driving that whole thing. So what's going to drive it? And you know, the planning, the organizing is real serious work. And for some teachers, this is a real change in how they're planning their work. And then we're still expected to, you know, create understanding and build skills and personalize and track the learning progress. And, you know, the real question is, how are we going to flip the classroom from powerful learning experiences, a hands-on one like this on aquaponics, into purposeful, engaging learning at home? And that's a big question. So I'm wondering if teachers are thinking about, you know, what PBL was like in their classrooms and how that face-to-face work might become something that could evolve into this new normal that is now, but maybe the fall and maybe long-term. We heard from anybody, Valerie, about the kind of learning work they have been doing?
Just in the chat room, what does this look like for you now, if at all? How are you able to use elements of project-based learning in your virtual classroom? Are you still wondering what that looks like? Kind of opening up the question. And while people are typing responses, there were just a couple questions. You can keep your video on if you like. It doesn't seem that we're having any bandwidth issues, so it's certainly up to you. And then also, there was a question, Camille, about the slides being shared. So typically, it's up to you, and so you can think about that if we'll be able to share them after.
Yes, the recorded video will be made available, I know, on our website
Perfect.
at projectfoundry.com. It will be made available, and I suspect CESA2 will be doing that as well, Valerie?
Yeah, we'll link that then on our COVID site. So it sounds like then, yeah, so Lisa has just started a 20-time project this week with her 8th graders. Dorothy is an academic coach, currently does not have a class, but she's working with other educators. And now this is Camille and I have talked about this, Melissa, not currently, but hoping to get admin to consider as the expected slump begins to happen. Yeah, so the first couple of weeks, right, students they're in their Google Classroom, they're in there because we think this is a couple of weeks, and now this is the sort of long-term thing. So how do we continue with that engagement, and how do we build authentic learning experiences for our students? And that's exactly the intention of this workshop today.
Yes, good. And, you know, I think always with everything that we're trying to learn to do that's new, we need to start where we are, and we need to have, you know, a prize that we're going to keep our eye on, and then take the steps toward it. So I think some of that will be evident here as we go along. You know, how might we begin to scaffold this for ourselves as adults, learning to do this kind of work? So, you know, again, looking at this, the space between, that classroom and the future, I think is going to be bridged in one way. And that really is this, that we don't go on that bridge alone. We don't bridge across it alone. We go together. We get our backpacks filled up, and we kind of arm in arm head out into the unknown. And probably the most powerful thing that happens in everybody's classroom is the kind of relationships that are there, that belonging and trust relationships in the classroom. And the question is, how are we going to bridge across into the connection and coaching relationships of distance learning? And the answer to that in my mind is this, that you really are the key to all of this. And that is an incredibly frightening thing and an incredibly powerful thing, because the ability to affect this really is in our hands. And so why do I say that? So that really the power is you. So first of all, the passion that we bring to our work is essential to why kids are interested in learning. They catch that from us. And the things that we're passionate about are really important ways in which we can engage kids. And I want to show you today how to do that. So, how would your love of photography or reading or collecting or gardening or local history or bugs or poetry or comic books, I don't care what it is, whatever the list of things is, actually be something you could engage kids in. And where's the learning inside of that? So there's the passion side of it. And then there's the focus part. As teachers, we all have deep expertise. We have deep expertise in teaching, but we also have it in the things we're passionate about. That right there is the ability in that expertise to help to find the right kinds of questions and find what matters in all of this. And the management skills that we have from teaching provide the focus that's needed. So you really are that ability to focus in on what's important and create the lenses that your kids need, because it's all pretty random for them right now. And then, this last piece about coaching or guidance, your guidance to what matters, to resources, to how things are connected, to why they matter. You have the maturity and the ability to see that. So these are gifts that our kids really need right now. We want to take them where they are and help them find a path from where they are. So let's look at how to do that. Place-based learning. I want to touch here on deeper learning, real-world inquiry, and 21st century skills, and how we scaffold that for success. And we're going to focus that in today on place-based learning. So starting close to home. And the quote I put up here, the idea is about empathy building relationships. Imagine learning as being a real place for creating empathy for whatever we're learning. And that empathy is what allows the humanity of each of our children to mature and to be used in positive ways to actually grow the kinds of humans and citizens that we're hoping for to take care of us in our old age. So, this whole thing about how is teaching really an empathy building relationship. And I'd like you to keep that in mind as we're looking at deeper learning and place-based learning. So deeper learning, just quickly, mentored, inquiry-based, problem finding and solving. It's relevant, complex, real world. Edutopia, Hewlett Foundation. These 6 competencies are the things I mean when I talk about deeper learning. Those are the places you would find information further about this if you want to explore this further. Lots of other places, lots of other schools that are doing this work. So deeper learning. And deeper learning is a great book out last year by Jill Almeida and Sarah Fine at Harvard. Deeper Learning, it's In Search of Deeper Learning is the name of it. And they take the premise that there are 3 virtues that are essential to deeper learning: mastery of content and skills, identity, bringing the core self to the work, and then creativity, actually from the mastery and identity, the emergence of powerful evidence of learning. So the creating things, and you're going to see a thread of that as we're talking through the different kinds of learning experiences I want to share with you. At the center of those three things are those learning experiences. How do we master content? How do we bring ourselves to it? And where does that creativity both come from and lead to? And so if we take the passion, you know, yourself, who you are as teacher, and the focus that you bring, the mastery you have over that which you are passionate about and know how to do, and you use it to guide and coach, and we lay that together with Jill Maida and Sarah Fine's virtues, actually it's like blending together the teacher and the students, right? That think of the triangle as the students for their mastery and who they are and the creativity they bring. And it's merged with these three important qualities of who you are as teacher. So, and you know, these gifts and these virtues are a wonderful blend for this time and lead us to kind of learning experiences that make the most of those things. So place-based learning, let's bring passion to it and focus to it and guidance. And these are the questions. First of all, in place-based, what is special or unique about where you live? And then why does it matter? So what's the uniqueness of something at your place and why it matters? Something your kids are engaged with where they are and why it matters. And then what could they do about it? What could we do to make what matters actually do something? So in essence, as teachers, our job is to frame the kinds of questions. What's important in the place? And what are the connections from that place to other places, people, ideas, events, things that matter? And, you know, how can we coach that learning forward into something important? So from this beginning of these three questions, the idea is that we're going to add driving and guiding questions. We're going to add the standards and skills. And then we're going to define what's the research that's going to happen. How is the meaning going to be found? And what are the results that are going to be created? So these 6 things, which are essentially 6 basic requirements of all project-based learning. What are the questions that drive the inquiry? What are we trying to learn about? What are we practicing to grow in skills? How are we going to do the work, right? In any project, what is important about it? Why does it matter? And how are we going to show that? These 6 qualities. We're going to look at it in place-based learning, but it's true for all PBL. So, all right, right here at my place, okay, what's unique about my place? This is the sky at my place, all right? This is the sky in my place, my neighborhood, right? Many days over, different days. And the question, what makes the sky have so many different looks? There are projects here, right? There's science projects, there are art projects, there are poetry projects, there's, physical geography, you name it, right? But let's keep going. In my place, what can we learn from our pets? Think about your own pets. Think what you've learned about life from them. Think what you've learned about care, and what could our students learn about care and empathy relationships. And if they don't have a pet at their house, what pets do they know? How could they learn more about pets and why they're important in our lives? Yeah, or on a neighborhood walk, right? You know, what do ducks do beyond cute? I mean, Wisconsin is one of the largest duck growing places in the world. Go figure. Or what about the dots? What's the deal with the dots on these leaves? That project is sitting there, right there in my yard. Why do those dots matter? Or this, you know, what's outside your door? So this isn't my door. It's not outside my door, but my kids have escaped New York City for the beach in South Carolina and going to school on the beach in South Carolina. This is what's outside their door. Or, you know, your grandparents, you know, what do they know that you should learn? What are the things they have? What are the recipes? What are the photos? What are the crafts they do? What travels have they done? How could interview skills be built? How could, in fact, bonding across generations and values be improved? Or what about this? What's going on here, right? So what's the sociology here? What's the science here? Well, what about inside the house? What about your kids' houses, right? So just take a few minutes and look at the projects that are here and things that are accessible in home, right? What's in the fridge and what's growing in the fridge? Where did the things that are in there come from? What countries are they from? What is the nutritional value of the food in the cupboard? What do we know about cars from the dashboard? And what's it tell us about machines? What games do we play, right? What about soil or the creatures that are eating our houses? Good heavens, right? Hey, what about the Freddie Mercury the poster, right? What about the long shadow up in the top corner? What makes that shadow so long, right? Right outside. What makes that happen? A button in the drawer. Voting's my superpower, right? What about receipts? What about the math in receipts? What about the history and the inventory? Projects are all around us. They're everywhere. Where can you find projects that would engage? And then let's think about how we're going to connect those to important skills and standards of life and make projects out of them. So I want to take you on a place-based learning experience that I did by walking out my door. All right, so I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I started with my passion, which is geography. I love physical geography, especially land and water. And I just can't stop about it. So, you know, my house sits on a subcontinental divide. You say. Like it sits just below it, actually, just like about 6 houses below the top of the subcontinental divide. And number two, you know, why does it matter? Well, it connects me to the world, and I want to show you how. And then the last part about it is what can we do about it? So knowing what I'm going to learn by this project, how could I make this matter and have impact because of where my house happens to be? So probably nobody else in this group lives on the subcontinental divide. I'm just willing to wager that might be true. But what is special about your place? What are the questions that might be of importance? And you probably live rather near your students. So what's the learning that's available in your place? Let's look at what happened with this. So first of all, I decided on the questions. What is the subcontinental divide and why do we care? And then how do storm drains help us see the world more clearly? So I finally decided to take the second question and use it as my main question about storm drains. And in that, I'm going to study the subcontinental divide and why it matters. But storm drains really seemed to be the place where there was sort of this really, oh, yuck, and oh my, look at the impact. Look at how important it is. I'm going to look at standards for conducting investigations and for creating models of systems. There probably are also science and other standards, social studies standards that could be included depending on the grade level of students. The skills, systems thinking, accessing information, and environmental literacy are what I'm caring about in this. Are there dozens of other skills, standards? Absolutely, and lots of other questions, but we need to decide. These are the ones I chose. There are others that would be great, but this is what I chose. Then I decided that my research was going to be done on the internet, in my yard, and in my neighborhood, in reverse order of that, actually. In my yard, walked out up the block, walked back down the block, and then I did some internet research. And the meaning of this is, again, that my place is connected to the world and to water everywhere. And I want to show you how that's the case and how we could help connect that to other people and have them value water resources more because of what we've learned. So this is the project, and let's go through it. So what is a subcontinental divide? So this is my house. It sits on top of that hill. All right, and when it rains, all the water on one side of the divide that flows to the east goes into Lake Michigan. And from Lake Michigan to the rest of the Great Lakes, to the St. Lawrence, and out to the Atlantic Ocean. And on the west side of my house, everything flows downhill to the Fox River and the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico. So I live in an important place, eh? So yeah, it looks like this when we look at the world map. And you're thinking resources for kids, right? Right? All we need to do is help them have the picture. We don't need to have them color the map, fill in the map. We just need them to understand, oh yeah, look at those points and, oh, where am I? So if we look at that in more detail, my house is there again, not very far from the shore of Lake Michigan, and all the water goes through this total river basin to the Gulf of Mexico. But if it falls on the other side of my house, over here on the east side, it's going to flow through the Great Lakes all the way up the St. Lawrence to the Atlantic Ocean. So let's look at that. And I want to show you exactly where that happens. So this is the spot right here, okay, with my phone. I went out and I took a picture of it. And the water on one side of the street flows to Lake Michigan, over on the right side. And on the left side, I'm sorry, on the left side, it flows to Lake Michigan. On the right side, it flows to the Mississippi River. And so if I come down the street and get to the lowest point of the street, lo and behold, there are the storm drains, right? Whole other project, how do we keep storm drains clean, right? And if we take a look at this, the whole clue is right here. No dumping, right? It drains to the lake. And if we follow our way back down the hill on the other side, the drain comes out at the bottom. It flows along the edge of the woods into this lake. And all the water in this lake, again, flows out to Lake Michigan through the Root River and through the Great Lakes to the St. Lawrence, connecting the water that comes down my street to everybody in New York and then across to Norway, right, as the water moves around the world. So it's pretty special, right? This story can be told over and over and over again by the things that we live with and near. And so I went out and I found lots of materials and things I want to teach kids about, and the big fight about whether Waukesha could have water from Lake Michigan because it's on the other side of the subcontinental divide. It doesn't actually get its water from there. It does now. And so I made a mind map, and I want to encourage you to make mind maps over and over again about this. First, I want to look at just learning in place. We're going to find the content, personalize it that's relevant, and standards-based. We're going to add skills anytime, anywhere skills can be practiced and refined. And we're going to think about the social emotional connections to the work that we're doing and what matters about it. And then the literacy that's connected to it, not just reading and writing, essential, but not just reading and writing, numeracy, environmental literacy, which is what we're looking at today, and artistic and cultural literacy as well. And then over and over again, how does systems thinking in an interconnected world play off these two things, global to local and local to global, right? Place-based learning is all about how do we learn where we are and connect it out, or how do we connect what's out there and draw it into where we are? So today we're going to look at local and go to global. And with that, you know, we're going to do a local choice project, which of course, I'm going to cover that over so it's not bothering us. And we're going to look at watersheds that we've already talked about, and the continental divides, and storm drains. And we're going to do an investigation. And we're going to do that in these ways, right? Including interviews and the place where I live and these sources. And then we're going to develop some advocacy. So as you can see here, from learning in place as a general idea, connecting the relationship to me, the project is developed right over here. And what I do with that then is I enter that in Forge, right? And so here's my project in Forge. How do storm drains help us see the world more clearly? What's the inquiry, the driving question, the guiding questions about the subcontinental divide and watersheds, etc. All of the resources I want to make available to kids. There's 4 things here that I want them to watch and read and understand. And then we are going to create a final project where they're going to make notes from what they learn, and they're going to make a plan of how to share the learning to improve water quality. And they're going to make a public service announcement or a video or a map of the watershed with pointers to reduce pollution, a book for younger kids to learn, a poem, an art piece. It doesn't matter to me. What are they good at? What do they care about? How would they like to show their learning, right? And what standards or skills is it reinforcing, and how would we actually attach the progress that they show to their portrait of learning. The learning targets are here, right? And this is Forge. We're looking at it across devices, and I'll show you more about what that's about in a little bit. So the project then, basically a summary of that is showing here, and I want to move on to look at one last thing here and then see what kinds of questions or comments you have. There are all sorts of other projects that come from this project. As you can see, this is just a sprinkling of what's possible, right? And almost all of these have to do thematically with the same area or the same discipline, right? About illegal dumping, or what happens downstream, right? What happens to the water when it goes through your pipes? Where does it go in your building or your neighborhood? What about the giant Pacific gyre? All that plastic out in the ocean. How to get there? What are we going to do about it? Who owns the Great Lakes? Who is in charge of that? How has water inspired art or poetry? These are just some of the ideas, right? There are dozens more, hundreds more probably. So I'm going to stop right there and see what you're seeing in the possibilities of learning in place, or questions that you have about any of this.
Well, I think, Camille, we're all sort of wondering where our water goes, first of all. So when we're done, I think we're going to all run out to our storm drains. I know I am. So just, there's been some great conversation in the chat. Certainly, so you've aligned this with 2 science standards, but certainly this could align with ELA, social studies. I know when I was a PBL principal, oftentimes one project for a semester would address all of the content standards because it was a very big project.
Right.
So there's been some conversation about that. Also just about the sort of the management and some of the hurdles to PBL are, how do we make sure that the standards are addressed? How do we make sure that students are able to manage and organize their time? And so you touched upon some of those things, but I'm wondering if you might have some additional thoughts in terms of how many other content areas to include, and just some tips and tricks for that management piece, which seems to be such a challenge sometimes.
Yes. So I think it would be most common for me to include the others, particularly ELA. As you could see, the options for students were multiple of how they could demonstrate their learning. So the standards that would be available for them to demonstrate could change from student to student and be personalized. If you have a project management system, that's easy to do. Otherwise, you've got complex spreadsheets set of managing all that. So I can show you how to do that easily. I would say for starting, fewer is better. Maybe fewer is better almost all the time, because how in fact do you actually keep track of all of that in terms of not on paper or not in a project-based learning software, but actually keeping track of how do you scaffold kids doing 10, 12, 15 standards and manage all of that? I would say this is a real time where less is more, and that you manage it, keep it smaller, and do well what you encourage them to do. And so getting a huge project over a semester with many disciplines and many standards is a very complex piece of teaching. And that's not to say you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't start there, is what I would say.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and so what I will do with this project is, in fact, as it's personalized to each student, they decide what they want to do, then add the standards for those students. And, you know, in Forge, you know, it's possible to make those available to students, you know, in differentiated ways. So that makes that simple. Is there something else I could touch on there that I'm just not remembering?
No, I think that's just a lot of good ideas that people have in terms of where they could take this project. So that's
Yeah.
been kind of the themes in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, how about time management?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm sorry, and then I'll follow up with just assessing mastery.
Okay, and so assessing mastery probably doesn't change much. It doesn't matter what methodology you're using. It has the same challenges and opportunities in every methodology we choose. How do we decide what is proficiency? What is good enough? So I think certainly using proficiency based methodology, using performance and rubrics against performance is the way many people are using a 1 to 4 scale. The question is, how do we avoid that being an ABCD? How do we actually have it be language around proficiency? What does it look like to actually be proficient? And how do we help students understand this part is proficient, this part isn't quite yet, and here's what you would do to get there. Here's the next thing. So being specific about feedback, about critique. And that all of this work, in my mind, is work that is growth oriented, and so early attempts should be less proficient, later attempts should be more proficient, and students shouldn't be penalized for that. And just like I just saw an article today, should teachers be being evaluated during this time, right? And teachers are going, how could you possibly evaluate us? We're new at this, right? Just like kids are with everything we teach them, right? They're new at it. And so, like, I don't want this to count just yet. I want to get more proficient. So I think we all need to think about those same stressors that are on students as learners, and how do we begin to move to a place where we are on a growth continuum with learning. And so repeated attempts and opportunities to redo work are ways that I would do that. Now, all of that gets in the way of the whole time management question. And so I want to touch on that in just a little bit. So I'm going to move on to get to that because it does, I think, help to address the time management question. All right. So I want to look right now at the why and the how, and remembering that, learning is a voluntary effort. We cannot make anyone learn. And so it's much more about the come on, come on, come on. How do we make it engaging that they volunteer? How do we get students that are volunteers to this effort? And it's easy in knowing that the brain is a constant meaning-making machine, right? It's always looking for understanding, for meaning. But I think we've forgotten it. So let's look at this. You have an idea or an experience, an interest, something that triggers the mind, and the synapses fire. Curiosity, just, something happens. The brain starts working, and we can't stop that. It just happens. We try numbing it in a lot of ways, but in fact, this just keeps happening, as we all know. And that leads to the I wonder, right? So something happens, the brain fires into interest and engagement, and the I wonder happens. And these kinds of questions begin emerging, right? So this and many more kinds of questions, right? So it's like an algorithm. There's an experience, curiosity, and wonder. And from that come driving questions for projects. So I like to help teachers learn this and think about it as an algorithm that they actually teach their kids. And I started creating this little algorithm picture because I was really worried about kids not being as curious as I think they used to be. Maybe that's just age. But I think, in fact, answers are so close, curiosity isn't as necessary. and so it gets dampened. So how do we remind people that their synapses are firing all the time and to lean into it? So here's how it would work. Okay, as I was finishing studying the effects of pesticides on bees, synapses fire, I wonder, if we can't save the bees, how will we produce enough food to feed everybody on the planet? It's a great project here, huh? Driving along the shore of Lake Michigan and seeing this seemingly endless bounty of fresh water, I wondered, how will our freshwater supply be protected with such a thirsty world? In a way, it's the same project too, isn't it? Little different content area, but some of the same concerns. So again, it's the experience, the synapses fire, the I wonder happens, and a question develops. This is the algorithm. So here are 6 examples of that. I'm going to give you about a minute to read these, all right? And then I'll tell you about a couple of them. If we were together, I'd have you all, raising your hands and talking about why you like different ones of these. That won't be today. So, a lot of people, when I work with teachers, say they like the bottom left, the one about the Welland Canal and Niagara Falls, and the question of how do the locks work, and what effects do they have on fish. This is a really fascinating project. That's kind of a hard project for kids to understand. Moving ships uphill on water. How do we make that happen? And what does happen to the fish? So it's a really engaging project. My favorite project of these is in the upper right-hand corner. And this was from visiting a huge old cemetery in Rochester, New York, and literally coming across Susan B. Anthony's grave. And just being filled with wonder. I didn't know she was buried there. And 30 minutes later, coming across Frederick Douglass's grave. And the dates told me, oh, they were alive at the same time. I wonder if they knew each other. So of course I had my phone and I took it out, and immediately there was this huge dialogue that went on across many years between these two people, right? In what ways did their friendship change history? What was that dialogue? One of the things I love about this project is when I present this to high schoolers, their question is, so like, were they just friends, or, was there more? I don't know the answer to that, but I know it engages kids. Another 30 minutes later, walking through this cemetery, there was a sculpture in bronze about the size of a small bedroom of a tea party with Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass. Projects are everywhere around us, all right? So I encourage you to take this algorithm and try using it over and over again. It kind of becomes addictive, all right? So now, this is the part about time management right here. If we think about projects as linked components, that we may not always start by creating the questions first, but eventually we get questions. And the driving question, the big question, the essential question and or driving question, the big question, has sub-questions or guiding questions. These guiding questions are things that support answering the driving question, right? That they're going to guide the work so that we can answer the big question. They're linked together. And the tasks that appear in this learning work are ones to answer the guiding questions. And if we're doing tasks that aren't to answer the guiding questions, we're probably spending time we don't need to spend if our project is well thought out, or we need to add a guiding question. So part of this planning process of linking these things together is to help manage time. And it also is a way to talk with kids about, hey, that is a great project idea. It's a different project than this one. We're going to put it on our project parking lot, right? Or on our bulletin board where we put project ideas. for students to select, especially where students are authoring their own projects. And that helps to draw us back to the matter at hand, the task that we're doing. And then the evidence itself should be tied to the task. If they're doing a task, there should be evidence coming from it. It may not be summative, it may be formative, but the task should produce something, even if it's notes or ideas for a discussion, right? It produces something. That's why we're doing the task. And so they're linked together. And then the assessment we're going to do is actually related to the evidence students produced. So these are linked components, and they drive the project forward in a way that, if we've been thoughtful in our planning, should help us to stay on track and have a relatively clear sense of when we say yes or no to a big idea that comes up, or things that might take us off and absorb a lot of time. The last thing I'd like to say is that if you look at this, you could plan the other direction. So let's say you have anchor performance tasks that students are expected to complete before they leave middle school or before they leave high school. You could start with the assessment and what kind of evidence you want students to produce. Therefore, they should do these tasks. I wonder what the questions would be around the content. So you can go both directions in using this linked component diagram. So here, I want you to look at this. So during this time, when we're creating projects, teachers can be creating the projects, but students can do the same, right? So here's a student, a 6th grade girl, and in fact, she was really worried about how she was going to keep growing in her art and how she could do that while she was at home, and where could she get inspiration, and what about her teachers that she wouldn't have access to every day, and you know, how would she be able to show her work and get feedback on it. And so she decided to start, she set a goal for herself to do a piece of artwork every day, and she decided that she was going to post it on Instagram. She had a brand new phone. She's going to post it on Instagram. And these are some of the examples of what she posted. All the way to the right are stickers that she drew and actually submitted to a little company that creates stickers out of drawings, and she's been selling them. So now she has a new little sticker business that's coming out of COVID-19, social isolation. And then this, out of that daily goal, she did this particular revision of drawing to the final product. And somebody suggested she send it to LaCroix, and LaCroix, you'll see over on the right, responded and said, "We love this image. We'd love to use it on our Instagram, was it? I don't remember where they were going to use it. In any case, they'd love to use it. Would she give them permission?" So now she has her first piece of work in a kind of contracted agreement with a business. All of that coming out of, this is 2 weeks of working on her goals. Huge possibility lives in this space. So we shouldn't be too afraid of this time. Here's a student working with his teacher, Alexa Lapp, and you can find her online. They are making a digital cookbook project. The areas that they're working on are right here. The description of it is here. You'll have this recording. You can go to Alexa Lapp also and find this. And students are actually connecting with their family for famous family recipes and putting them together in a 5th grade cookbook. So this is a 5th grade project, but as you can see, this could be at almost any level and of a variety of different learning standards that would be being covered by it. And then I'd like to recommend to you Models of Excellence. This is from EL Education and the Center for High Quality Student Work. There is simply mind-blowing work here, incredibly high quality work, right? So I encourage you to go there and take a look. And when you're feeling tired or down, this will in fact inspire you. So the next time we gather, I'm going to be doing a project on in what ways has telling time changed over time. And I'm just going to give you a little taste of it right now. We're going to connect that to A Wrinkle in Time, the book, and look at resources related to Madeline L'Engle, who offered this book to every publisher, every large publisher or small, and was turned down over and over again. The connections that relate to this telling time and things about Wrinkle in Time, its connections to math as well, and a reading site, Reading Works, where you can get standards related to reading material, and an idea from Madeline herself about writing sonnets. So, and a connection to doing that through narrative poetry and sonnet poetry. So that's my next big venture into projects. I haven't finished building it out, but I'm excited about it. So I'd like to show you now how some of this lays out in Forge. And I'm looking right now at a learning experience built by Lauren Glowacki, a middle school teacher who just is putting together a project in Forge on historical fiction book study. And the things that she's done with that, the tasks and targets. This project's going to be available in Forge for other teachers to use and the materials she's put there. And these are some of the products of students that she's working with in doing historical fiction book study. And she's also put a project in on resources for finding books online. And these will be available in here for you to have access to them. I'm really thankful to Lauren for her work around this and how it supports my work and other teachers' work. So what's Forge do? What's it possible? And as we deconstruct the role of teacher and say, what are the most essential things that we do as teachers and how do we make sure those happen? How do we think about this work as using standards as a place that kind of help us to frame the learning, but then have interest be the playground, right? Standards are the fence, but interest is the playground, that passion and interest that drives the work forward. So this is Forge, logging in. This is Liger Leadership Academy in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. They're using the Foundry software. And when you log in, you have the opportunity to see the experiences of of a student. This is one student, Aaliyah, and all of the experiences she has on the go at different states of completion, 3 waiting for teacher to approve that she's created, 1 she's turned in, others that are active. And these are all projects of kind or a course or a internship or a workshop or a seminar, a variety of learning experiences, not just projects per se. And we're going to create an experience, as you can see, and you have choices of forms that are used to help you structure this work. So there are a variety of project planning forms, seminars, lessons, courses, independent reading. The forms structure how you would in fact create this work, so they're a guide in and of themselves. And we're going to choose one right now and look at a mini plan, and the forms look like this. They have a title and a description always. What is it I'm creating and what's going to be about? There's a place for your content targets, and the standards are in Forge, the Common Core, Next Gen Learning standards, science standards, and skills, My Way skills from Next Gen Learning Challenge. And so these little forms or big complex forms help to control what am I doing and how will Forge keep track of that. And that gets filled out. So here's a little project on why PBL matters and the steps of the project or the tasks. Videos have been attached and the targets have been chosen. Right? Moving through the software further, there's a work to do page for teachers, and that has experiences and the tasks related to them. It's got journals and logs. And this is a data table over to the right. All of the students and all of the work that's current and active so that teachers have it all in one place. So instead of it being turned in, it could be put on the drive, could be put in a basket on your desk in pre-corona time. But right now, all that evidence is being turned in here, and we can see the tasks, the logs about how students are using their time, the journals that are there, the evidence that they're turning in of their learning. And we can look at that evidence right here. So these are learning logs around how this student is using time in a Socratic seminar on moral courage, right? Busy with that. And we can see every student at any point, what do they have on the go? What do they need to do? Their personal learning plan pages with goals and all of the experiences, evidence being turned in, evaluation being done against the standards that have been chosen, and performance. How much is done, at what level of proficiency, and how well it's being done, right down to the very deepest detail. So I'm going to stop here because I want to take time to see what comments or questions are coming from you.
So just a quick reminder that we have about 2 minutes before we need to transition, at least our team, into another meeting. But there are some questions, I feel like they've been addressed in the chat, some questions about what projects might look like for younger children.
Mm-hmm.
And I did put the link to Forge in the website. Are there examples of that for younger children or places that you might direct them?
In terms of projects for younger children, well,
yeah.
The first thing that comes to my mind is the models of excellence that I mentioned to you earlier. And you would find projects at all grade levels here. And you can sort it by grade level and sort it by subject.
Perfect.
It's a
Great.
very cool place.
Good. And then there were some questions about pricing, which I see is addressed in the chat room as well. And so I'm wondering too, there seems to be a lot of interest in, so what does the software look like? Would you be open to a follow-up for people that were interested to go maybe deeper into?
You bet. You bet.
Awesome.
Of course, I would be delighted. And we're very excited about having people engaged in the software and helping to guide us. We've been developing this software really for most of this century, actually. And that it really is teacher developed and teacher guided development. So we would be delighted to do that.
Great. So we'll watch for that on the CESA 2 website, and we can do a follow-up to the registration group today as well. Thank you so much, Camille, for your expertise and your fabulous visuals and just the curiosity that you've sparked with us today has been wonderful.
Well, you're very, very welcome. I'm just so excited to have so many people on the trail together crossing that bridge, right?
Absolutely.
It makes it easier to do that. And if we're going to do this again, I'd love to hear from people what they'd like to talk about.
Perfect. We could definitely do that, maybe in a smaller
group.
group.
All well in your teaching. It's worth the effort. It's so
very much so. It's good work.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon. And we'll follow up with part 2, as well as certainly other information relevant to PBL and Forge in general.
Right.
All right, take care.
Thanks, Sally.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.